Okay, last week we looked at a subject that I referred to as Jesus and the ant. We have two different perspectives of this universe. We have the perspective of a little kitchen counter ant, what his perspective of the world is on one hand. You know, he knows the kitchen counter, he knows the walls, he knows where the garbage pail is, he knows where the food and the crumbs are, and he knows where his little hidey hole is. And that's probably the extent of his universe. And then we compare that basically with what the perspective of Jesus and the universe is. Same universe, same bounds, same laws of physics, and yet from one perspective, you get maybe an inch, and the other perspective, you get millions of light years. It's incredible. Well, I want to just follow up and see if we can kind of finish up this topic this week. Back in Genesis chapter 19, you don't have to, I'm not going to read from that, but in Genesis 19, we are introduced to the concept of an angel. Now, we remember back in Genesis chapter 3 how Satan was conversing with Adam and Eve, or Eve specifically. We're not sure if Adam was in on this conversation or not, but we know he was conversant with Eve. And so we are introduced to the concept of an entity outside of ourselves. It is a spirit being. We get up into Genesis 19 and we see this concept of spirit beings fulfilled a little bit deeper. We see the introduction of angels into the dialogue of mankind. And the first thing that we see about angels is that they, at least while they're here on this earth, and they're generally here because of a specific reason or a job that God has for them, but while they are here and manifested in this reality that we're familiar with, they look like us, talking about males, they sound like us, they dress like us. They are virtually indistinguishable from us until, of course, they are not indistinguishable from us when they get into their angel mode, as it were. Throughout the Old Testament, there are little glimpses, there are little parting of the curtain into a spirit world, or a world of which we generally do not understand and we are not familiar with. Turn to Numbers chapter 22. Numbers 22. I want to look at a few of these incidences. Put yourself in this mindset. There's one day a prophet by the name of Balaam. And God gave him a particular job to do, and he did it partially. He wasn't completely obedient to the command of God. He just did it partially. And he was rebellious in the other sense. And he is taking a journey from point A to point B. And in this journey, he is riding on the back of a donkey, or a mule, or as the Bible refers to it, as an ass. And I'll for deference sake here, so that everybody doesn't crack up and I feel like a fool talking about Balaam's talking ass, just that concept, it makes me laugh. So I'm going to refer to it as a donkey. They are going through a gorge. where the hills are all scrunched together, and it's just basically a one man at a time gorge. And Balaam is on the back of the donkey, and the donkey stops. And Balaam doesn't know why he stops. He just knows that the donkey stopped, and he's trying to get him to go. And so he's putting the spurs to him, or he's whapping him on the butt with his cane or his whip or whatever you use to get him going. And at that point, the donkey then scrunches against the side of the hill and hurts Balaam's leg really, really bad. And so now Balaam is ticked off. First the thing stopped. Now he's crushing his leg against the side of the hill. And so now he's beating the donkey. Numbers chapter 22. Around verse 28. Yeah, start at 27. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord. See, the donkey is seeing something that Balaam doesn't see. That's why he stopped. That's why he couldn't go any further, because in his way stood the angel of the Lord. Donkey saw it. Balaam had no clue he was there. So when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, he fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with a staff. So he's ticked off. He's irate right up to the high as he can get. Verse 28. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam. Now get this concept. Here we got a stupid donkey, a mule, an ass, whatever. And the thing is talking. I mean, remember Mr. Ed, the talking horse, stupid TV show from years ago? This is probably where they got the inspiration for that thing. The animal is talking. We're not talking about a little parrot that can, mimic certain sounds and so forth. And, people say that they're talking. No, this donkey, this mule, this ass was verbally articulating words and sentences to Balaam. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, What have I done unto thee that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And Balaam said unto the ass, if it wasn't bad enough that the ass is talking to Balaam, now he's talking to the ass. Now we've got this dialogue going back and forth between an animal and a human being. Because thou hast mocked me. I would that there were a sword in my hand, for now would I kill thee. So Balaam still hasn't got the concept that, hey, isn't this a strange scenario that we're talking together? No, he is still so mad at the animal that he says, I wish I had a sword, I'd kill you right now. He's missing the whole point. He's talking to an animal, and the animal is talking to him. What kind of a world are we living in where that type of a thing is so close to us? Balaam is sitting and he's riding. The animal stops because the animal sees the angel of the Lord. Balaam did not see the angel of the Lord. How sad is that? Well, we flip over to Joshua chapter 10. We have another instance of weird things happening. In Joshua chapter 10, there is a battle. And the battle is between Joshua and a coalition of 5 other kings. Joshua is severely outnumbered. Israel is on the precipice of getting wiped out once again. And Joshua goes into battle. God gives him a battle plan, tells him what direction to come from, what time of day to come from, and so forth, how to execute this battle, and Joshua does it. And now he wins. He's got the 5 kings on the run. He is slaughtering them left and right. And the only thing that he's worried about at this point is that he doesn't have enough daylight left to kill as many of the enemy as he wants to kill, because he knows who's ever left after this battle, they're going to come back for him again, and he's going to have to fight this battle all over again. So he wants to get as many killed as he can possibly do in this period of time. And he's freaking out because the sun is going down. Joshua chapter 10, beginning at verse 12. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, this is Joshua speaking now, sun. Joshua addresses the sun. Now Balaam got done talking to an ass. Now Joshua is addressing the sun. He says, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. He is talking to the planets, as it were. Now, I talk to the TV all the time. I have not yet had a response from the TV, but I talk to the TV all the time. I talk to myself all the time. I'm in the car driving down. I'll talk to myself. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but hey, I like me, so I'll talk to her. It's okay. But here he is, in front of all Israel, talking to the sun and the moon. Verse 13. And the sun stood still. Now, what that simply means in our language is that the sun didn't move. Or if you want to say the earth didn't move. In other words, the relationship between the sun and the moon and the rotational aspect that gives the impression that the sun is moving, nothing happened. The sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day. These are incredible phenomena that they're taking place in the earth right now. They did. So we make fun of the ant, that his perspective of this universe is the kitchen counter, the garbage pail or the garbage bag, and the little hidey hole that he lives in. You say, wow, get a life, you know. I mean, we know there's lots of things, sunrise and sunsets and symphony orchestras and Nobel Peace Prizes, and, we can compute, how many light years this is from that, and what the composition of that star is based on the light and the filtration and blah, blah, blah. We can do all these things, and we think we're so great. That's our perspective of the universe. The ant's perspective of the universe is just that little thumbnail of nothing. But what we're seeing here in the Old Testament, that even as far as we are concerned, there are elements of this life of which we have no clue. There are aspects of which we cannot part that curtain and see to the other side unless God opens it for us. And the amazing thing is that it seems that from time to time, God does open these curtains a speck so that we can have little glimpses of the other side. Here we've got a man proclaiming to the sun, and whether you want to get technical, like I said a second ago, well, the sun stops or the rotation of the earth stops, or, which one do you want? I don't really care. That's something that you're not going to replicate in 1 billion years. And yet it can be done. It was done. God allowed it to be done. The talking animal. Incredible. Look over in Second Kings, chapter 6. So all the way through the Bible, we get these little tantalizing glimpses of a different dimension. If you want to refer to it that, different world, different dimension, a different place, however you want to characterize it yourself. But we see that this little three-dimensional world of which we are familiar with, sight, sound, sense, touch, feel, and so forth, there is something else other than the little 5 senses that we bring to the table. Now, some people just going out the gate say, well, that's all in your mind. Oh, okay. Well, that's another dimension then. Let's talk about the mind. That's another whole can of worms. Second Kings, chapter 6. Beginning of verse, let's say. Well, let me just give you this backup before you hit the verse. Elijah was a prophet of God, and he had a servant. The servant wasn't a very good guy. We come to find out later on. But Elisha was a tremendous prophet. He was a thorn in the butt to the kings and so forth around him. They hated him because he was always prophesying about God and telling how bad the king was and so on and so forth. And the kings said, look, I've had enough of this guy. I'm going to put an end to him. And so he sends out a bunch of guys to arrest him. Guys are killed. He sends out another band. These are like 50 in a band he's sending out. The posse was 50 guys. He sends out another band of 50 guys, another posse, to arrest him. They're killed. He's not doing it. Elisha's not doing it. God's killing them. Finally, the king says, that's it. I've had it with this thing. And in the middle of the night, he sends his army. I mean, I don't know. It could have been 500 guys. It could have been 50,000 guys. It doesn't quantify the amount, but it was enough to encompass the entire city. So here you have a situation. You've got a maverick prophet, maverick as far as the king is concerned. The king wants to shut him up. The king sends the army, surrounds the town. The prophet's servant wakes up early in the morning. He goes outside the house and he looks around, and the hills are covered with the chariots and the army of the king. He comes running back into Elisha. And that's where we pick up the narrative here at verse 15. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 15. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host. That's another Old Testament term for army. A host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. King wasn't messing around. He wanted this guy, wanted him bad. And his servant said unto him, unto Elisha, alas, my master, how shall we do? What do we do? We're toast. Verse 16, and he answered, this is Elisha, fear not. Yeah, right. Well, that's easy for you to say. Everybody always says that. Fear not. Don't worry about it. It'll all work out. Well, okay. Here he did. Fear not. Why? For they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Well, what did that mean? Especially to the servant. The servant looks out there, he sees completely 360 degrees. The hills are covered with cavalry, foot soldiers, and chariots. Elisha's one guy. And he says, don't worry about it. He says, those that be with us are more than they that be with them. Well, the servant looks at Elisha, and he looks at himself, he looks at Elisha, he looks at himself, and then he looks at the stupid army that is encompassing the city, and in his mind, I'm sure he's thinking, are you absolutely nuts? What are you smoking? They that be with us. I don't see anybody standing in here for us. Not one single solitary person has lined up with this little shield and sword and spear and says, oh, I'll help you. They that be with us are more than they be with them. Verse 17. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. Well, wait a second. Let's go back into the world of reality here. You have two guys standing in a house. You have an army compassing the city. One of the guys in the house is totally freaking out. The other one says, oh, don't worry about it, because they that be with us are more than they be with them. The other guy looks at him and says, you're nuts. I see one guy here besides me, and that's you. I don't think you can beat this army and take them on. That is the reality as far as the servant knew it. Elisha saw a different reality. Elisha saw all the king's chariots and the horsemen and the army. He saw that. He's not in total denial here. He's not off in la la land someplace where he's just denying reality. He sees it. But he knew something that the servant didn't know. That there is an element of this world that we cannot always see, that we're not always aware of, that we have no concept is there, but Elisha knew it. How did he know it? I don't know. Did God supernaturally open his eyes before? Did God just permeate his spirit with a calm and an assurance and a serenity that he just didn't lose it? I don't know how God conveyed this information to him, but he instinctively knew it. And it's incredible that he uses this expression, Lord, open his eyes. Whether the eyes were closed or the eyes open, it did not change any circumstances out there. The army's still there. Eyes shut or eyes open. The army's still there after him. The difference was that when Elisha asked God to open his eyes, now the servant was able to see something else. Instead of just the quote-unquote reality that he was used to in life, he was now able to see into the spiritual element of this universe. He was able to part the curtain and see behind it. And when he did that, he saw something else. He did not just see the king's army. He did not just see his cavalry and his soldiers and his chariots. Now he saw the chariots of God and the chariots of fire. Nothing changed. The king's soldiers, they didn't see any of this stuff. They had no clue. They're all smote with blindness in a few minutes, and they're all led away. Boom. Captive by Elisha and the stupid servant. How embarrassing. So there's an element in this world of which we, on a daily basis, have no concept of. This is the essence of the Bible. Why are these things put in there for? Just to get us so titillated and worked up and angry and frustrated? How many times did Jesus say in his discussions with people or about people, open your eyes. He that has eyes to see, let him see. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Somebody's not seeing something. Somebody's not hearing something. It's all there. But with our 3 little or 5 little senses, we're not getting it half the time. The disciples come back at the woman at the well. Jesus, aren't you hungry? Hey, I've got meat to eat that you guys have no conception of. What's he talking about? Did he go over there? No. There's an element of this world of which, for the most part, most of us never have a clue about. And because we don't see it, feel it, smell it, hear it, sense it, and so forth, then we categorize it in our brain as it does not exist. We don't believe it because we haven't seen it. Seeing is believing, right? Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. You remember the story? 3 Hebrew children. Nebuchadnezzar had built a big old statue of himself out there. These guys were not going to bow down to it. Government found out that these guys were not bowing down to the image, and so they talked the king into making a decree that anybody who did not bow down to the image was going to be cast into a fiery furnace. And when we say a fiery furnace, these things are, big, huge, walk-in type furnaces. And so it came to pass. No, guys weren't going to buckle down. They were not going to bow to this thing. King says, okay, in the fire you're going to go. So he has them all tied up, bound. He makes the fire 7 times hotter than it normally would be for, whatever purpose that furnace was. And what it was supposed to do, he makes it 7 times hotter. It was so hot that some of the guys who threw these guys into the furnace, they themselves were killed in the process. It was that hot. So he throws them in. A couple of seconds later, they should have been instantaneously just burned to a crisp. As soon as that, 4,000, 6,000 degree heat or whatever hit their lungs, boom, that should have been it for their eyeballs popping out of their head, all the bodily fluids just exploding and so forth. They should have been toast immediately. So after a few seconds, he glances in, and between the shimmering flames and the little flickering light and so forth emanating from the fire and the heat and the flames, he sees movement. Well, the only movement he should have seen is just that, wavy heat convection type thing. It's moving up and so forth. But no, he sees people walking around. And once his senses come back to reality, it dawns on him, these are people walking around in here, in those flames that were so hot that even the soldiers who threw them in were killed. Verse 24. Daniel chapter 3, verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished, or we'd say astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men into the midst of the fire? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but didn't we just throw 3 guys in there? And they answered and said unto the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire. Remember, they were tied up. Well, the ropes went boom, just like that. They were burned to a crisp. But their clothes weren't. Their eyeballs didn't pop. Their skin didn't just all flake off and so forth. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th, now they threw 3 in. He says, I see 4 guys walking around. The form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Well, who conveyed that little tidbit to him? I don't think he was familiar with what Jesus looked like. You know, pre-incarnate Jesus before, Bethlehem. I don't think he'd, pick him out of 3 guys. He wouldn't be able to pick him out. But yet, in this instant, somehow, God conveys unto this king the identity of that 4th man. How many laws of physics have we just ran over on this little incident? That fire is not going to consume skin? Fire is not going to sear the lungs? Fire is not going to pop the eyeballs and so forth? How many laws of physics have we broken right here? And what's the telltale common denominator? They, the 3 guys, are in the presence, literal, physical presence of the Son of God. Well, what does that tell you? You mean to tell me that if I'm with Jesus, I can get, on that ocean liner and sink 2 miles to the bottom of the ocean and theoretically still be alive? How does that work? I don't know. Ask Jonah. He'll sort that one out for you. You mean I can be consumed or thrown into a fiery furnace so hot that it's going to kill the guys who threw me in? How does that work? I don't know. Ask Jesus. He was there with them. You mean I could die and be dead 4 days and in the process of putrefaction and be resurrected again and smell like a rose? How does that work? I don't know. Ask Lazarus. You see, each one of these oddball, weird, unbelievable phenomenons in life, they all have one thing in common. Jesus is there. And at that point, all the laws of physics go right out the window. Because he made the laws of physics. So we have these little glimpses and these little tidbits coming through the Old Testament. By the time we get to Jesus, the doors are just blown open. I mean, you read his life, it is just, you could write a book on it. Instead of calling it Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you could just as easily call it How I Broke the Laws of Physics and Got Away with It. Because this is what Jesus did every single day of his life. It was incredible. For the first time, on a concentrated basis, we now really, really have an insight into the spirit world. We see Jesus conversing with angels. We see him conversing with demons. We see the demons conversing with him. I mean, these guys are just chit-chatting like, not all friends, but just chit-chatting like people who know each other. Oh, Jesus, what do we have to do with thee? Art thou come to destroy us before the time? Nah, I haven't come to do that. You know, your time's coming. Don't worry about it. But I want you to get out of this guy. Okay, yeah, we'll get at him, but where can we go, Jesus? Well, I don't know. Let me think a second. Oh, there's a herd of swine over there. Take a hike. Get in the herd of swine. And so the demons leave the guy. They hit the herd of swine. 2,000 pigs run over a cliff to kill themselves because they can't stand the prospect of being demon-possessed. They have more sense than the average human. So you have a sentient type thing in the pig that he knows he's demon-possessed. He wants to kill himself to get out of that misery. Gee whiz, we can hark back to the talking animal with Balaam. God comes through the course of history and he just screws everything up for us in this sense. All of our sensibilities, all the things that we come to realize and think of as normal are thrown out the window when God comes on the scene. Talking animals. Talking asses. There, I said it. Talking asses. Good grief. Pigs that would rather kill themselves than be demon-possessed. Absolutely incredible, these types of things. The temptation of Jesus. They're the arch two enemies of all time, of the universe. Satan and God. Having a discussion out in the wilderness at the temptation of Jesus. They're not fighting each other. They're not killing each other. They're not zapping each other with, photons and neutrons and all this other stuff. They're talking with each other. It's bizarre in and of itself. Well, I don't believe in a Satan. I don't believe in a real devil. I think the devil is just, whatever we can conjure. Oh, come off of it. You're the ant. You see your little kitchen counter. You see your little garbage bag. You see your little hidey hole, and that's it. Wake up. There's more to life than just this little universe that we consume ourselves in. Jesus turns the physical world upside down. He's commanding the seas. He's commanding the wind. He's commanding the sun. He's commanding trees. The physical world is just in a complete topsy-turvy when he walks around. He's walking on water. He's moving through walls. What happened to the laws of physics? Same thing that happened to the laws of physics, the 3 Hebrew kids in the fiery furnace. Jesus is there. The same thing that happened when Elisha says God opened their eyes and boom, the hills are covered with chariots of fire. The one common denominator is when God is on the scene, everything changes. And the fact that we, as Christians, don't run to him, grab him by around the knees, and hang on for dear life, and say, God, I don't know what you have for me, but I'm not leaving you. You're not going to get rid of me easily. Disease comes my way, okay, I'm hanging on. Financial setbacks and ruination comes my way, boom, I'm hanging on. Dissolution of my marriage, the loss of my kids, and all this stuff, I'm moving on and hanging right here with you. Ask Job about that. See, every bad thing, every scenario that we can think of, God has thrown in throughout this Bible some antidote to it. You lost your health? You lost your reputation? You lost your wealth? Have you lost your security? Have you lost the love of your mate? Have you lost all this stuff? Have you lost all your kids? All hope of living? Have you lost it all? So did somebody else. Did they get through? They ended up with twice as much as what they started with. You're in a ship in the ocean. Everybody hates your guts. They take you physically and bodily and throw you over the side. You know, every time I go on a cruise, every single time I go on a cruise, I find myself at some point standing on the railing there by myself, looking out at an expanse of which the mind cannot even begin to calculate. And I'm thinking to myself, what would happen if 3 or 4 guys came and picked me up and just threw me over the rail? There I am. Well, I could tread water for, I don't know, maybe a half hour, an hour, before the cramps set in. Then I begin to, go under it and start to gurgle and so forth, and that's the end of it. Or a shark comes, or, whatever, fill in the blank, who knows? But every single time I'm on a ship, I imagine that scenario as to what Jonah must have felt like. You talk about a feeling of utter hopelessness and helplessness. I can't imagine anything worse than being thrown overboard in the middle of the ocean. The ship's long gone now. And you've done all you can to stay up, but now you begin to sink. And you're under for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, that's it. After a couple of minutes, now you're sucking water, and you're dead. There's no comeback from that. How in the world do you get out of that one? God's on the scene. So God makes a big fish or a big whale, whichever you want to classify it as. Whale swallows him up. Jonah is under that water for 3 days and 3 nights. The exact type of Jesus Christ. 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. In fact, Jesus said, you want a sign about me and my resurrection and so forth? I'm only going to give you one. That's Jonah. There's no coming back from that. There was no coming back from the crucifixion. I mean, beaten to a fare-thee-well. Whipped. Spears stuck in his side. Nails in his hands and in his feet. Killed on that cross. There's no coming back from that. Jesus said, but I'll give you one, Jonah. Wasn't any coming back from that one. But there was. The point is, do you see this world from the standpoint of an ant? With your little 5 senses? Your little wealth of experience that you bring to the table? Or can you at least get your head around the possibility that there might be more out there than what we can see and experience? Because it's been done in the past. How do you see the universe? Through the eyes of an ant? Or the eyes of Jesus? Heavenly Father, I don't even know how to begin on something like this. When these things are refreshed in my mind and I am brought to remember them and such, these are so incredible. The dire positions and the circumstances of which these people found themselves. I mean, utter, complete, abject helplessness and hopelessness. And yet, they came out more than conquerors. How easy we forget. Yeah, I know why you put these in the Bible. I know why all these weird, utterly incomprehensible situations that people have found themselves in. And they got out. I find it incredible that we don't take a lesson from this stuff. And when the world comes down on us, when the bottom falls out, when all hope is lost, instead of panicking, instead of going to pieces, just pick one of these Old Testament or New Testament scenarios that we can relate to, that is similar to our situation, and see how it came out for them, and to gain hope from that, to be encouraged by that, to feel sorry for somebody that they had to be the guinea pig. They had to endure this stuff so that something could be written about it, so that 2,000 or 3,000 years later, when we're going through our little piddly experience and done with our little pity party, that we can look back on them and gain hope and confidence. That although you might not bail us out, but we know that you can bail us out. And that's the difference. Oh, Father, give us a backbone. Give us eyes to see. Lord, like Elisha said about this, Lord, open his eyes. And Father, that's what I'm asking for you today. Not just for them, for myself also. I'm in the same boat. I'm mortal. I'm constricted and bound by these same 5 senses that everybody else is. For the most part, I do see this world from the eyes of an ant. And I'm asking, Father, for grace that you would open our eyes so that we can see behind that curtain, that we can see beyond what our senses will tell us, and to realize that there is a God that is not bound by the physics and the laws of this world, who is not bound by the common sense things that we interpret things by, who is not bound by any conventional wisdom at all, but is limitless and is bottomless, and it is far-reaching as the mind can take us. God bless your people. In Jesus' name.